Greetings. This is Yasha Ben Yishrael, also known as Terry, for the Yasha Ben Yishrael Terry show. Sounds of my Uncle Thomas Whitfield. Let's get it in today, y'all. Yeah. All right. Let's get it in today, y'all. Let's get it in. Today I have a good subject today for you. I'm hoping not to be before you long. Today's title of the subject is Mount Santorini, the 10 plagues, the Red Sea, archaeology, and anthropology. Yes, today's subject is a good one. And I'll be talking about the Mount, the explosion of Mount Santorini, and how many archaeologists, geologists, and other scientists and academic scholars believe that the explosion of Mount Santorini is what caused the 10 plagues and the dividing of the Red Sea. So that I don't be before you long, I would like to just get right on off into this. So let me share my screen. All right. You're going to get straight to this. You're going to get straight to this today. All right. This is an article. This here is an article from Greeka.com. It's called Santorini Eruption and the Biblical Connection. The Santorini eruption, this is Santorini, Mount Santorini, and the biblical connection. Let me read this out for you. It says, excuse me, the biblical connection with the volcanic eruption of Santorini. The Exodus section of the Old Testament is a non-inviolable text held in very high esteem not only by Christians but also by Islam and Judaism. There is a contradiction in the way people have interpreted the Bible. Some regard it as legends and myths, while others as the Word of God. Exodus revealed the story of the birth and life of Moses, a die-hard Hebrew credited for the emancipation of the Jews from the clutches of Egyptian slavery. The Exodus depicts the great escape of the Jews from Egypt. Moses ultimately divided the Red Sea and permitted the Jews to traverse to Sinai while the Egyptians drowned in the surging waves. In recent times, the Exodus has been in great demand in the scientific community. Again, in recent times, the Exodus has been in great demand in the scientific community and has been studied extensively. They are of the opinion that the storyline in the Exodus is primarily based upon seismic movements. Geologists believe that the eruption of the volcano is the basis of the 12 plagues depicted in the Exodus post eruption. A vast neighborhood might have endured suffering and tribulations like the plague, droughts, firestorms, and etc. Not even cities located on the higher platforms could escape the wrath of the devastating earthquakes. Molten magma ash would have completely blackened the atmosphere in all likelihood. Scientists believe that most of the 12 plagues occurred as a consequence of volcanic activity. The mention of darkness in the Bible may be without doubt ascribed to the molten ash and pumice on the surface. Even the stormy winds were blowing in the southeasterly direction when where Egypt is located. Excuse me. Furthermore, according to renowned archaeologist Charles Pellegrino, that's Charles Pellegrino, a renowned archaeologist, he said that high velocity dust storms were supposed to have rained down in Egypt from the dust clouds, thereby turning days into night. The Exodus story also mentioned the plague and devastating fire upon Egypt. Archeologist Charles Pellegrino compares the Santorini eruption with that of Mount Helen in Oregon as a burning example of what the Santorini eruptions might have been. The plagues occurred due to the volcanic eruption and attracted hordes of grasshoppers. In addition, there were evidence of erratic animal activity due to the alterations of air pressure and weather conditions. After the complete devastation of Egypt, the Jews were able to get away in spite of the Pharaoh's soldiers in hot pursuit. In the Exodus, there's a quotation that goes like this: "And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud and led them away, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night." Exodus 13 and 21. This state, a biblical affair, can easily be related to the volcanic eruption. Again, this of biblical affairs can easily, this state of biblical affairs can easily be related to the volcanic eruption. Now, this is from archaeologists. We got archaeologists and geologists here. Significantly, the precious Plinian column created by the Santorini eruption might have afforded cloud cover by day and would have become visible by fire, like fire at night. One must also take the division of the Red Sea into consideration, since it might have drawn water shaping a caldera. Moses, too, would have crossed over, whereby making things much more difficult for the soldiers. Biblical stories can be interpreted in many different ways. The Exodus dates back to the 13th century, but this is by no means due to the fact that it is an anthology of stories. The Exodus dates back to the 13th century, but this is by no means exact due to the fact that it is an anthology of stories. Historians have no clue about the Pharaoh who ruled during the era of Moses, which in itself is regarded as the most genuine timing of the story. More about Santorini. That's the end of that article. So we looked at some highlights in here. We got what's some highlights here. So we see here that scientists and archaeologists have evidence of Santorini and that it relates back to the 10 plagues. I'm going to share my screen again. I have some more information for you. Try to get this out the way real quick. Now, this here is from the website called Biomedical Scientist. The Biomedical Scientist, the Biomedical News, Views, and Analyst. So this is a very scientific magazine, a very scientific article. And it's from the Institute of Biomedical Science. This is a scientific article. We're not talking about religion now. We got the scientists involved here. I told you that I had evidence from that the scientists, the archaeologists, the historians, the geologists, they have evidence. People will sit up there and lie and say that there's no evidence of the Exodus. But if you really looked at the story and understood the story, that is a bold-faced lie. If you understood Egypt and the history and the writings in Egypt, that is a bold-faced lie. So now we're going to introduce science and the scientists into the story. The 10 plagues of Egypt, January 7th, 2019. Stephen Mortlock asked if the 10 plagues of Egypt were the result of an ecological domino effect, or was it divine intervention? As children, many of us will have read how the Hebrew people living in Egypt were suffering under the cruel rule of the Pharaoh. Moses asked the Pharaoh to let them return to their homelands in Canaan. But he refused. As a consequence, 10 plagues were inflicted on the Egyptians in a divine demonstration of power and displeasure, designed to persuade the Pharaoh to reverse his decision. But were the plagues historical events, or, as some historians suggest, simply passed down accounts of several natural disasters? Some scholars concede that, from an historical perspective, the first 9 plagues resemble natural events, and which some are disconnected. Others appear to be part of a chain of reactions with set patterns and a rapid succession. The Egyptians were renowned for recording every event, whether temporal or religious in nature, but there are few references to plagues in ancient Egyptian literature. What if the plagues, however, involve villages and a countryside around Goshen? These might not have been referred to the royal courts for insertion of official chronicles. That's a key point right there. The question is asked is, what if the plagues, however, involved villages and countrysides all around Goshen? He said these might have not been referred to the royal court for assertion in official chronicles. Here's an illustration of the massive volcanic fallout. It says a massive volcanic fallout would provide the simplest and most plausible scientific explanation for this contamination. What contamination? Let's read about the contamination of the Red Sea and the evidence that Mount Santorini, in its explosion, caused the exodus and the division of the Red Sea. Okay. It said, when did the plagues occur? And who was the tyrannical Pharaoh? The Greek historian Herodotus put the dates around 1570 and 1550 BC, when Egypt was under the rule of the Hyksos, an Asiatic tribe. But there was no Pharaoh, at least until Ahmose I. That's 1550 to 1525 BC. He raised a rebellion and overthrew the invaders. During this time, apocalyptic rainstorms devastated much of Egypt and were described on the Tempest Stele of Ahmose I. So we want to look at the Ahmose I stele, right? And it talks about during the time of Amos 1 that there was apocalyptic rainstorms, and it devastated much of Egypt. And again, it was described in the Tempest Stele. I have to say that and repeat that because we learn through repetition. These have been attributed to short-form climatic changes caused by the volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini around 1630 BC. Although it also has been suggested that the storm reference is merely a metaphor for a chaos caused during the war. Roll up the screen. Okay. Travisenato. Travisenato, in his 2005 books, The Plagues of Egypt, Archeology, History, and Science, Look at the Bible, suggested this eruption was also the trigger events for the plague. There are indications that the environmental effects of these eruptions were felt around the globe. Some scholars have also linked the eruption of the legend to Atlantis. Travisenato believes the volcano ash tainted the Nile, causing it to become acidic, and sediments found at the bottom of the lake along the Nile seems to suggest that there were deposits of volcanic ash sometime around the Middle Bronze Age, which would be in line with the eruption on the Greek volcanic island. In a pre-industrial ancient Egypt, sulfates from the massive volcano fallout would provide the simplest and most plausible scientific explanation for this contamination. A red acidic Nile would have killed the fish, kept people from drinking from the river, and according to contemporary records, caused burns which later became infected with larvae. Wow. However, Alfred Edersheim proposed in his Old Testament Bible story that Thutmose II, in 1509 to 1479 BC, may have been the protagonist. In 1886, when the mummy of Thutmose II was unwrapped by Gaston Maspero, there were scars from some type of infection, which were still visible even after being embalmed. Maspero described the mummy as being scabrous and in patches and covered with scars. Lesions covered his back, waist, arm, and legs. The legs of the body, and there were a mixture of pupillus, scabs, and scars. Had Thutmose II died of a disease spreading through the region at that time? Question. Evidence exists that the queen's nanny, Citri, suffered from a similar condition. The details are very similar to descriptions of the sixth plague, where boils burst forth upon man and beast throughout the land. That's Exodus 9 and 9. Let's talk about the Red River. Another candidate for the pharaoh is Ramses II, 1303, 13, 1303, 1303 to 1213 BC. Let me turn this phone off because I can't have all these silly interruptions. 1 second, people. Be right back. All right, here I go, here I go, here I go. All right, so let's go. So it says, let's start at the beginning. Another candidate for the pharaoh is Ramses II in 1303 to 1312, which made popular by Hollywood epic The Ten Commandments. At this time, the climate of the capital city, Pi Ramses, was wet and tropical, but towards the end of his reign, the climate became dry and more desert-like. This change has been confirmed by a study of the stalagmites in local Egyptian caves, which have proved a record of the weather patterns of the time. It is possible that the Nile returned from a swiftly flowing river. The Nile returned from a swiftly flowing river into a sluggish, muddy watercourse due to the rising temperatures and arid conditions. This was the basis of the 1950s naturalist theory by Greta Hort, who purported that certain algae, in particular the Haematococcus pluvialis and the Euglena sanguinea, were able to flourish in these conditions. The red color is due to the presence of the astexanthin, and under the right conditions, the cells can be populous enough to turn water red. Euglena sanguinea is also known to produce. I'm gonna spell it so y'all can look it up. That's EUGLENASANGUINEA, sanguinea. Euglena sanguinea is also known to produce the potent ICTHYOTOXIN, which is the exiotoxin, euglenophene. Wow, that's a big word. I'll spell it so you can look that up. That's ICTHYO toxin, TOXIN, and the other word is EUGLENOPHYCIN. The idea of the algal blossom is also proposed by Stephen Plugmacher, who believes that when the Nile changed, it allowed the toxic algae Planktothrix rubiscin to thrive in the warm, slow-moving water. When the algae died, it turned the water red, causing phenomenons called burgundy blood. Wow. Dr. Joanne Burkholder has cited a similar condition in North Carolina in 1996, but caused by, that's PFIES, Tyria piscidia, PISCIDIA. So there is recorded evidence for this type of event. The ancient historian Josephus Flavius reported that the blood red water was undrinkable. The fish died, and the air was filled with a horrid stench. Algae blooms can be harmful to wildlife, as the algae contains a toxin that can accumulate in shellfish and poison the animals that feed on them. Fumes from densely concentrated algae blossoms can also disperse toxins into the air, causing breathing problems for people. More importantly, A bloom in the water would have killed the fish, allowing amphibians to breed unchecked as fish eat their eggs. Studies have also shown that tadpoles, when stressed, become of a change in their environment, quickly develop into frogs. Wow. The toxic water would have caused the amphibians to leave and swarm over the land in overwhelming numbers. The amphibians would have stayed away from the deadly river, and as many would have died, leading to the third plague, lice, which could mean lice. This could mean lice, fleas, or gnats, based on the Hebrew word kinim. If toxic algal lead to the first plague and dead frogs followed, it is not surprising that a swarm of insects also would follow. The plague's condition. The lack of frogs in the river would have let insect populations. Let me reread that right. The lack of frogs in the river would have let insect populations, normally kept in check by the frogs, increase massively. The rotten corpse of fish and frogs would have attracted significantly more insects to the area near the Nile. It also an infestation If so, an infestation with certain insects could have set the stage for the later plagues. Scientists have theorized that the sickness that caused the beast of the field for Egyptians in later plagues might have been the blue tongue or African horse sickness. These are orbiviruses of the Rheoviridae family, both of which can be spread by insects of the Colecoides species. Marr and Malloy argued that the fourth plague represented a swarm of flies, such as the stable Stomoxys calcitrans. Studies have shown that cattle heavily infested with stable flies can become anemic and have lower milk yields. The stable fly also bites human and could have led to the boils that occurred in part of the six plagues. In many parts of the world, the species of a carrier of trypanosemids parasites, including the Trypanosoma evansi and Trypanosoma brucei, there would have also been an increase in the common housefly, which is the Musca domestica. These Latin words for these animals and these sicknesses is getting to me. So we talk about this fly, which belonged to a group of families often referred to as filth flies. The housefly has been in existence since the origin of human life, is well adapted to life in human habitations, and act as a potential vector of diseases. A recent study found that over 100 pathogens, including bacteria such as E. coli and S. aureus viruses, fungi, and parasites, have been associated with the prolific insect. So it is not surprising that people would have been suffering from increased illness. Could the boils have been caused by S. aureus? The fifth plague, which killed off the Egyptian livestock, have similarities of rinderpest. A member of the genus Morbillivirus, a member of the Pyromyxoviridae family, This causes high fever, diarrhea, and ulcers in the mouth and noses. Rinderpress is spread between animals by direct contact and possibly aerosol over limited distances, meaning airborne. The virus can be spread by secretions from the eyes, nose, or mouth, and the feces, urine, blood, milk, or reproductive fluids of animals. Around 16 BC, the plume of another Santorini eruption may have been responsible for the seventh, eighth, and ninth plagues. The fiery hail, the locust, and the day of darkness. According to the archaeologist Charles Pellegrino, the Santorini eruptions would have been comparable to Mount St. Helens eruption of 1980. And this volcanic plume, coupled with high velocity dust storms, would have rain, precipitation, and higher humidity. It is possible that when the volcanic ash mixed with thunderstorms above Egypt, it led to dramatic hailstorms. This could have created the conditions which caused the infamous desert locust to change from the solitary to a more gregarious form. Not only are they more sociable, they change in appearance, becoming stronger, darker in color, and more mobile. They can swarm over long distances, and according to the United States Food and Agricultural Organization, when they get hungry, a one-ton horde of locusts can eat the same amount of food in one day as 2,500 humans. Such a pestilence could devour all the remaining plants hell did that the hail did not destroy. Wow. Archaeologists, archaeologists, archaeologists have always believed that the last plague, the death of the firstborn male, was caused by wheat infected with the fungus. But this seems unlikely since infants died also, and they would probably not have been eaten grain. Excuse me. Also, why were some children spared? There is a similar historical precedent where argot fungi infected rye grain and is believed to have precipitated the Salem witch trials in the winter of 1692, where it may have been the cause of the hallucination, trances, seizures, and violent behaviors that were the supposed signs of being a witch. Wow, that's something. Although argot did not cause death in the settlers, it is unclear why it affected some people and not others. A similar fungus could have infected the Egyptian grain. It is very easy to dismiss the plagues as a fable when confronted with natural. Excuse me. Is it very easy to dismiss the plagues as a fable when confronted with natural events? This is the conclusion, y'all, and the answer to that question. Were the plagues an ecological domino effect or divine intervention? It is very easy to dismiss the plagues as a fable when confronted with natural events such as volcanic eruptions, thunder, and desert sandstorms driving locusts into Egypt. But there are many problems with trying to analyze historical events from contemporary records. Often, it is difficult to work out where and when they happened. In this instance, the period for the plagues of Egypt is sometime between the years 1570 and 1440 BC, depending on who was writing about them. Eusebius Pamphili of 263 to 339 AD, the first church historian believed the specific date to be 1446 BC. And yes, there were the volcanic eruptions in around 1630 and 6 to 1600 BC, one of which is described as the largest on record. But it was 1,050 kilometers, which is 650 miles away from the northwest part of Egypt. And the eruption was many years before the Exodus took place. The eruption would only have caused some of the plagues. If one or other of the dates is wrong, I am not a theologian and rely on empirical evidence to make decisions. But occasionally there is a question where you ask there's a question when you ask what if. This is by Dr. Stephen Mortlock. He is a pathology manager at Nuffield Health Guildford Hospital. He would like to thank Matron and all of the staff at Nutrion Health Guildford Hospital for their continual support. All right, so we see that there's a lot of scientific and historical evidence for the Exodus, the 10 plagues, and all of this stuff. It's just that your scholars have overlooked this stuff tremendously. Now, I want to talk about archaeology. If you want to look into archaeology, right? I'm going to share my screen again. We're going to talk about archaeology over here. Share my screen. I didn't even share that. That was crazy. But then go back to the article so y'all can see the article. I was reading the article. I told y'all where it was all at, right? These are 10 plagues. The blood, where the water was turned into blood. The swarming of the frogs, the lice, right? The wild animals destroyed everything in their path. The pestilence, the boils, the fiery hail that fell from the sky, the locusts, the darkness, right? And the death of the firstborn. Mount Santorini caused all of this. And this again is from the article, The Biomedical Scientist. I'm gonna share my screen so y'all can see this, so y'all can know where to look for it. The Biomedical Scientist, right? Can y'all see that? This is the article. I thought that I was showing my screen because I can't read it from looking at the little screen on my computer. So I have to look at it. What's up, Water Blue? Water Blue, what's up to you, Doc? Yeah, we're in here just reading over some history and some science, because a lot of people say that science don't support the Bible. And archaeology and all that don't support the Bible, and that's a bold-faced lie. It all depends on who is telling the story, all right? And then you have these guys that'll tell you crazy things like, they'll say crazy things like, well, the archaeological consensus is, and they say that it'd be the people who arguing against the Israelites. They'll talk about the archaeological consensus, well, the archaeological consensus says this, but I'm going to read to you about what the real archaeological consensus is. And it has nothing to do with the way that these dumb people like your Garfield Reeds, your Chris Harrises, your Sarnettas, your Shaka Amos, your Shaka Ndungas, yeah. And none of them guys know what they're talking about. Now let us know I'm gonna let you know what the archaeological consensus is, because they making it like Like, say, for instance, they'll say stuff like, well, the archaeological consensus says that the Exodus never happened. So what they're trying to do is make it like the majority of all the scholars in the world agreed that the Exodus never happened. And that is not what the consensus is. We're going to read to you what the archaeological the consensus is. This, you can read this from the Cosmos magazine. Okay, this is when the archaeologists declared their consensus. In April 1st, 2021, almost a year ago, a little more than a year ago, a little less than a year ago, archaeologists declares consensus. We can be absolutely certain about the past after all. Okay, we're going to get this read in. Make sure I share my screen like I did. No, I didn't. I got to share this screen. I'm going to stop that. Then I got to present it again. So, y'all, I'm going to share this screen this time. That way y'all can read along with me. I'm going to share my screen here. We're talking about the archaeological consensus. He said, he said, if he doesn't make you repent by the night terror, harden the hearts, then he brings the pain, many methods. I feel you. I feel you, Vicar World. Let's get back to this archaeology here about the archaeological consensus. And when these guys talk to you about the archaeological consensus and tell you what the archaeological consensus says, then you know that they don't know archaeology. You know, these people say the stupidest, dumbest stuff all the time. Like when Chris Harris got on there and said, you can't have a logic in a formal, informal conversation. There's no such thing as formal and informal conversations in reference to logic. He made that stupid shit up. And I mean, I'm a very intelligent man, and I'm trying to get y'all up to speed to see how these so-called Israelite God-hating Negroes, you know what I'm saying, in the Black conscious movement are really not that intelligent at all. Let's get to the bottom of this. It says the archaeologists around the world have declared a universal consensus stating that all archaeological records can give us a consistent understanding of the past. So when they talk about the archaeological consensus only state that archaeological records can give us a consistent understanding of the past. That is what the consensus was about. All right. It wasn't nothing about every time you say something, a group of archaeologists teamed up against you or what you had to say or what you had to think. That's just stupid, ignorant, dumb. You know what I'm saying? So let's read that again. It says archaeologists around the world have declared a universal consensus, stating that all archaeological records could give us a consistent understanding of the past. And this was done because many archaeologists have always fought and disputed over their findings. One archaeologist has said the Exodus never happened, another archaeologist has said it did. You know what I'm saying? And these guys are lied to you saying that the archaeologist, you know, has a general consensus on their finding and their interpretations of their finds, and that is a lie. Okay, it says archaeologists around the world have declared a universal consensus stating that all archaeological records can give us a consistent understanding of the past. In a shock move, every single archaeologist have co-signed the same agreement. And this agreement is that the records, All records, all archaeological records, whether they agree or disagree, can give us a consistent understanding of the past. That is what the archaeological consensus is. And because of that, it says no longer will there be disputes about how much meat ancient humans ate, or whether they migrated across ice, or what the oldest Homo sapien remains are. The leading researchers in the field, and also every other researcher in the field, have finally come to the same conclusion. There's enough discord and disagreement in the world as it is. We don't need to add more rigorous academic debate, saying Professor Helen Hoax, deputy head of archaeology at the University of Australia. Archaeologists are famous for putting forward different and conflicting theories. Archaeologists are famous for putting forward different and conflicting theories about their evidence, about what their evidence suggests. Archaeologists are famous for putting forth different and conflicting theories about what their evidence suggests. And this was explained by Dennis Ovan, the director of the Johannesburg Knowledge Institute for Excellence in Skulls. But when we finally sat down and talked, we realized that almost all of the arguments stemmed from petty disputes on the field trips. Limited and competitive funding, massive ideological differences, the publish or perish world of academia, all of that can be smoothed over by apologizing for waking up a whole tent waking up a whole tent one time, even though you said you weren't a snorer. The centerpiece of the argument is a comprehensible and universal primer on archaeological ethics, detailing the most ethical ways to do archaeological research. It turns out that the ethics of archaeology was the easiest to solve, says Dr. Anna Indy Jones, an ethicist at the Center of Innovation for Dusty Stuff We Thought Looked Important. Everyone in the world places exactly the same cultural and spiritual significance in the past, and they all have the same codes for dealing with historical artifacts and ancient human remains. Jones would not provide any example for these codes, saying it all in agreement. It's all in agreement, while gently out the door of the lab. The agreement was signed at an international online meeting at a time that was convenient for every time zone. Hoax says that the internet and the isolation brought by COVID-19 was an important catalyst for this agreement. Social media is a wonderful tool for delivering nuance. She says it invites you to consider other views thoughtfully and promotes agreement between widely different views. I think it would be great if we all spent more time on social media and less on research. Maybe if they tweak some of these algorithms to capture more attention. The archaeologist believes that their disagreement is an excellent model for other fields of research, particularly paleontology, where gaps in the fossil records lead to massive disputes on how to fill them. Sure, archaeology is by its very nature a field that's dependent on patchy evidence, says Oven. But just because we don't know something doesn't mean we should suggest different theories. Why do we get so hung up on facts? It's much more important that we all get along and have a happy day. Well, not with the house fire, but consciousness, and these called fighting Ellen Fight Science, a BS science community, and MSN in science communication, both from Australian National University. I think some of that. So the general was nothing no more, than archaeologists coming together in a meeting stating that all archaeological records can give us a consistent understanding of the past. The general consensus of archaeologists is stating that all archaeological records can give us a consistent understanding of the past, even if they disagree. So that means that if your archaeologists disagree with my archaeologist, you don't take your archaeologist's side. You consider all of the information. And that's the general consensus. And none of you atheists, my homeboy Mugabe, I love you, Muduwa, but you don't do that, man. You know what I'm saying? Don't none of y'all, your Dagger squads, your Uncle West, who swear he's scientific, but these niggas don't be knowing what they talking about. These Negroes, excuse me, niggas. I mean, I don't want that word to be misconstrued. It's Negus, right? So, which are the kings and sovereigns of Ethiopia. Now I'm fixing to go into share my screen one more time, and we're going to conclude this show. I try to make it quick, and it's just under an hour. Hopefully, I'm going to stop sharing that screen. Hopefully, we can get this done within the next 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So I'm going to present again and share my screen. Right? So what are we looking for here? We want to talk about biblical archaeology, right? The father of archaeology is Petrie. He's the father of archaeology. The father of biblical archaeology is this man right here, right? His name is William Foxwell Albright. I'm going to tell y'all a little about this guy, but I'm going to read what we have here. It says that serving as director of the institute that would one day bear his name, William Foxwell Albright, the father of biblical archaeology, presides over the golden age of Near Eastern archaeology and biblical studies. I want to tell you about something about William Foxwell Albright. When he was living, he was a man unmatched. Okay, pretty much like myself. The kind of guy that didn't nobody would want to challenge him. You know what I'm saying? Did nobody want to challenge nothing that he said, because he was feared and respected in the field of archaeology as true pioneer, one of the greatest ever, right? And it wasn't until William Foxwell Albright died that people who didn't like him began to start debunking his research. It's pretty much like beating up on a dead man, where he couldn't explain or defend his research in the grave. You see, so these people have come up with different ways and theories to try to debunk William Foxwell Albright, and others had chose to defend him. And this is how you get the three different aspects of biblical archaeology, consisting of the maximalists, the minimalists, and the revisionists. The maximalists are those like William Foxwell Albright, who taught that the Bible and archaeology and history and science all coincides. And then you have the minimalists, which are those who try to use archaeology, science, Bible, and the history to explain away the Bible, to try to say that the Bible didn't happen, or then you got the revisionists, which are those who try to say that it didn't happen the way that the Bible suggests. to try to say it didn't happen, or at least the way the Bible suggests. So this is William Foxwell Albright. He was a harbinger from biblical archaeology, and he has proven the Bible to be true. Okay, a very, very hardcore pioneer in the study of archaeology. That's William Foxwell Albright. But that being that, okay, what do we have here coming up next? I want you all, we're getting ready to end this show. So I would like for you all to push that like button, subscribe. I need to get my subscriptions up, y'all. Subscribe. We've been doing real good on the channel. The views has been blowing up. We getting our first views that reached over 1,000. You know what I'm saying? So we doing real well. I'd also like to ask for donations. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't, I just don't have a whole lot to invest in what I'm trying to do. So I'm asking for donations. Uh, outside of that, you can donate at Cash App, $ capital Y, all one word, capital Y, lowercase ASHA, capital B, lowercase EN, capital Y, ISHRAEL. And we're going to exit out of the program with that beautiful song called Reflect by my Uncle Thomas Whitfield. Rest in peace, Uncle Tommy. All right. Shalom.